"You're so cold lately." That's what they said, as if silence means I've stopped feeling, as if quiet is the crime, not the wound. I didn't go cold, I just stopped explaining. There's a kind of tired that doesn't look tired, a kind of ache that doesn't cry anymore. It just folds in. You smile because that's what's expected, and after a while the smile becomes a reflex, like blinking, like nodding, like agreeing when you want to leave. There was a day last month I remember because it was raining, not the heavy kind, but that whispered drizzle that makes everything look like it's trying not to cry. I was sitting across from someone I love. They were telling me how I'd changed, how my energy was off, how I don't laugh the way I used to. And I wanted to tell them the truth. I wanted to say, I'm still here, but I've been carrying too much in silence, and somewhere along the way, the words stopped working. But I didn't. I nodded, smiled, laughed, the kind that doesn't even sound like me anymore. And I realized, this is how you disappear while still being visible, like a ghost in full makeup, like a presence no one knows how to hold. There's a mirror in my hallway, frosted around the edges, the kind that blurs when it's cold. Lately, it feels like it's copying me. I stand in front of it sometimes, not to check my outfit or fix my hair, just to see if I'm still there. And even then, it's hard to say. I think people forget that silence is not empty. It's just what happens when every explanation becomes a brick in your chest. You try to tell them you're not okay, but they say, "Don't be so negative, Jew." Hey, you try again. "I'm overwhelmed." They say, "But you're doing great." Eventually, you stop trying, because explaining starts to feel lonelier than just shutting down. They say I'm cold, but the truth is, I burned so long, I ran out of flame. It's not that I stopped feeling, it's that feeling started to hurt more than hiding. And hiding? Well, hiding is quiet. It doesn't argue, it doesn't disappoint. It just sits, like the unread messages in my phone, like the half-drunk coffee I left by the window. Still warm, still waiting, like me. Funny how we learn to disappear politely, with smiles, with "I'm fine," with emojis and quick replies. But no one asks what fine costs you. No one asks what it takes to be okay enough for others. You become a performance, a pleasant echo of who you used to be. And then they say, "You're different now. You're distant. You're cold." But maybe cold is safer than disappointed. Maybe silence is kinder than screaming and still not being heard. Or maybe I just don't have the energy to convince anyone I'm real anymore. The thing about emotional exhaustion is that it doesn't show up in fevers or rashes. It shows up in how long it takes you to reply to "hey," in how heavy your body feels after a full night of sleep, in how much effort it takes to say "I love you" and mean it. Sometimes I wonder, if I screamed, would anyone even notice it wasn't a laugh? That's the kind of quiet I'm in, not peaceful, not grounded, just curled up in the corners of my mind, watching myself become a stranger. I still go out, I still talk, I still wear the face they remember. But inside feels like walking through fog in a dress that doesn't fit anymore, and the mirror keeps frosting. Day by day, it blurs, like it's tired of reflecting someone it doesn't recognize. Sometimes I touch it, hoping the heat from my hand might clear it. But it stays cloudy, like it's telling me, "You're not gone, just hidden, just waiting." And maybe I am. Maybe I'm waiting for someone to say, "I see you even when you're quiet, even when you don't explain." But until then, I'll stay like this, still, soft, and maybe, yes, a little cold. Because cold doesn't ask questions. Cold doesn't demand reasons. Cold just is. And when everything else feels too loud, cold feels safe. But I still wonder, if I scream and no one hears, is it still a sound? There was a time I used to try, to explain, to soften the way I asked for love, to make my sadness sound polite. "I'm just tired," I'd say, when what I meant was, I'm unraveling and no one's noticed. I remember one night. The lights were low, Music playing from the other room. Something soft. Something forgettable. I had spent hours gathering the courage to say it. I don't feel okay. They looked up from their phone, laughed a little, said, "You're always so sensitive." And just like that, my heart folded in on itself like laundry no one wants to deal with. It wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. But that moment, that shrug, that half smile, it stitched a new rule into my skin. Don't make it harder for them to love you. So I got quieter. At first, it was just skipping explanations. Then it became full sentences left unsaid. Eventually, I stopped reaching out at all. Not out of spite, but because the echo of my own voice started sounding foolish. What's the point of repeating myself if it never lands? If it always bends back into judgment? If all they ever hear is drama, not the cry beneath? There's a mirror by my front door. Same one from last part. Still frosted around the edges, only a now. The frost isn't just at the corners, it's spreading. A thin film over the whole thing. Like silence finally took over the reflection too. I look into it before I leave the house, and I don't even fix my face anymore. Not because I don't care, but because what would I be fixing it for? Sometimes the effort to show up costs more than the disappointment of staying in. You start wrapping yourself in strange layers, not physical coats, but little emotional cover-ups. You wear scarves in summer, gloves at dinner, blankets no one sees, not to stay warm, but to stay contained. Because if one feeling slips out, you're afraid the rest will follow, and a flood too messy for anyone to clean up. So you stay wrapped. Wool made of phrases like, "I'm just tired," "It's nothing," "I'm okay." And it works, kind of. People stop asking, you stop trying, and things stay manageable. But inside it feels like someone turned the heat off and forgot to tell your heart. You laugh sometimes, but it doesn't sound warm. You hug, but it doesn't reach past your sleeves. Even your tears are quieter now, more like whispers on the inside of your eyes. It's strange how detachment gets misread. They think you don't care, that you've given up, that you're cold. But the truth is, you're protecting the last soft pieces of yourself, because no one else did. You learn to sit with your own silence. You learn its patterns, the way it moves through your chest at night, the way it curls up beside you when the world gets too loud. It becomes your companion, not joyful, not cruel, just constant. And in some strange way, it feels more honest than pretending you're fine. Because silence doesn't require translation. It doesn't need to be validated. It just holds you without trying to fix or label or correct. That's how you survive when the world stops listening. You go quiet, not because you have nothing to say, but because saying it hurts more than swallowing it. And so, you build a little home inside yourself, insulated with detachment, heated only by memory, decorated with soft reminders, a playlist you never play, a jacket you still hang though they haven't visited in months, a mug, same one from before, now cold but clean, always clean, and no one sees it, no one asks about it, because you still smile, you still show up, you still laugh when it's appropriate. They say, "You're so composed, you're so mature." But no one ever says, "You must be tired from carrying all that quiet." And you are tired, I mean. Not in a sleepy way, but in that deep, aching way that lives under your ribs. So when they say, "You've changed," you nod. Because it's true, but what they don't see is that change wasn't rebellion. It was preservation. You didn't shut down. You just shut in. Because that's the last place they couldn't reach and ruin. You're not dysfunctional. You're still here, just behind the silence. Because sometimes being quiet is the most faithful way we stay alive. And silence is where the soul waits when it knows the world isn't listening. There's a kind of quiet that feels less like peace and more like defense. Stillness isn't always calm. Sometimes it's just the only way not to shatter. I've been told, "You've changed." Said like a warning, like a crime I didn't realize I was committing. But I didn't change. I collapsed. softly, privately, in ways that looked neat on the outside, because I knew messy would only push them further away. The soul doesn't always cry out. Sometimes it just sits behind a frozen mirror, watching, waiting for warmth that doesn't demand performance. And if that warmth never comes, you learn to keep still, to conserve, to hold your breath long enough to forget you ever needed air in the first place. There's something strange about how they talk about you, how they describe the version of you they remember. You used to light up the room. You were always so open, so funny, so full of life. As if what I am now is a lesser edition, a postscript, a flatline. They want the glow, but not the fire that made it. They miss the laugh, but not the ache underneath it. They miss the excess, not the person. And so I stopped showing up as that version, not to punish anyone, but because continuing to perform joy while empty is a kind of self-erasure I can no longer afford. I used to explain that. I used to say things like, I'm still me, just quieter. I'm healing, not hiding. I just need space. But those words, they fell like feathers, too soft to be taken seriously, too vague to be held with care. And eventually, I stopped saying them, but the silence they left behind, it's still echoing. In every seen message unanswered, in every plan I cancel with a too long explanation, in every smile I hold for just 2 seconds too long before letting it fall. The mirror in the hallway is almost fully blurred now, not just frost, but condensation too. From breath I forgot I was holding. I stared into it this morning, really stared. I wanted to see something familiar, a trace of who I used to be, or maybe a new version I could choose to believe in. But what I saw was neither. Not warmth, not cold, just stillness. The kind that doesn't ask questions, the kind that only wants to survive the day without being called dramatic. I leaned in close, closer than I ever do, looking for proof that I'm still inside this skin, and I swear, just for a second, I thought the mirror flinched, or maybe it was me. Sometimes I wonder if the reflection is waiting for me to thaw, or if it's just a memory, stuck in time, wearing my face like a mask that's forgotten how to move. I carry myself gently now, like I'm someone who's been cracked too many times, and I have. Not always in big ways, but in those invisible daily splinters. You're too much. You're too quiet. You're just not the same. And somewhere in all those fragments, I started shrinking. Not because I wanted to disappear, but because staying large meant being too exposed, too judged, too unheld. So I made myself still, tidy, acceptable. But stillness, when not chosen freely, becomes a kind of ghosting of the self, of the soul, of the loud, beautiful parts I used to let live out loud. And here's the irony. They say I'm hard to reach, but the truth is, no one knocked when I was wide open. And now that I've gone quiet, they finally notice the silence. But it's not emptiness they're hearing. It's the sound of me, no longer bleeding just to feel seen. That's not coldness, that's preservation. That's a soul that finally said, no more. Not out loud, not with drama, but with stillness. The only language left that doesn't demand explanation. And maybe that's the real wound. Not being hurt, but being misread. Over and over, until the only safe place left is quiet. Still, not broken, just self-contained. Because sometimes being misunderstood is quieter than being hurt. There's a room I go to. It doesn't have a name, no clocks, no windows, no one knocking, just stillness and space to breathe without being asked why I need to. It's not a physical place, it's something I carry, like a sweater I never wear but can't throw away. Something stitched from all the times I explained myself and still wasn't understood. This room, it doesn't need my smile to be real. It doesn't ask me to be louder. It doesn't say, but you don't look sad. It just lets me sit, lets me be. I didn't know how much I needed that until the explaining started to hurt more than the silence. You know what quiet grief looks like. It looks like turning the mirror around so you don't have to face the distance in your own eyes. It looks like typing out a long message then deleting it because you already know they won't get it. It looks like saying I'm sorry for things that never needed an apology, just so the conversation doesn't go silent again. And the irony, you do all that, not because you're cold, but because you care so deeply it drains you. I've walked into rooms full of people and still felt like I was whispering into a void. And then they say things like, just talk to me. But when you did, they heard noise, not meaning. So now I don't. I've built this quiet space inside myself where I don't have to explain that my silence isn't anger, it's exhaustion, it's protection, it's survival. Sometimes I still pick up my phone and write the whole story. How I felt, what triggered it, the sentence that broke me in half. And then I backspace the whole thing. Not out of fear, but because explaining it to someone who won't hold it feels lonelier than holding it alone. I still say I'm fine. I still ask, how was your day? But inside, I'm standing in that room, hands in my pockets, staring at a memory I didn't ask to carry. There's a mirror in the corner of that room, same one from before, frosted, blurred. Today, I wiped it, just once, not to see, just to feel the glass. Because some days, you don't need answers, you just need texture. Something real to touch when your emotions start feeling like vapor. I don't try to see myself in it anymore. I just let it be there. A witness. Like the kind of friend who doesn't speak, but still knows when your chest feels heavier than your smile. The silence I carry now, it's not empty, it's layered, built from moments that stacked like bricks. You're too sensitive. You overthink everything. You're being dramatic. And over time, I stopped correcting them. I let them think what they needed to. Because defending your softness to someone who only values strength is a fight you lose, even when you win. So now I don't explain. Not because I've shut down, but because I've learned the cost of reopening to the wrong hands. You don't owe your language to people who only know how to hear themselves. You don't owe clarity to those who respond with correction instead of care. And you definitely don't owe your silence an apology. This room, this inner place I've built, isn't isolation, it's sanctuary. A space that asks nothing, demands nothing, just offers peace in the shape of presence. Sometimes I bring people here, quietly, not with words, but with the way I answer slower, breathe longer, smile softer. Some understand, most don't, but I'm learning. Some silences aren't meant to be broken, only witnessed. The window had been closed for so long I forgot how light moved when it wasn't filtered through a wall. That morning I opened it, not wide, just a crack, enough to let the room breathe again. Enough to prove I could. It wasn't for the noise, I wasn't ready for that. It wasn't for the view either. It was for something quieter, something that didn't ask for my story or my smile or a version of me that made other people feel comfortable. Just air, moving in, without expectation. There's something sacred about letting something in without explaining why it was closed in the first place. I didn't say anything. There was no deep moment, no tears, just that soft inhale. The kind your body takes before it realizes it's been holding on too tightly. That's the thing. You don't always notice you've gone numb until something soft touches you and you flinch like you're about to break. But I didn't flinch this time. I just let the air come in, let it move across the floor, let it touch the mug from part one, still on the table, still clean. Let it rustle the corner of a letter I still haven't opened. The letter arrived weeks ago. No return address, no handwriting I recognized. I placed it by the candle, the one I light every evening, not for light, but for proof that I'm still here, that something in this room is alive. Even if quiet, I haven't opened it, and I don't think that means anything's wrong. Sometimes presence is enough. Sometimes a letter's existence is more comforting than its contents. I used to need answers. Now I just need things to stay, even if unopened. Even if unread. The room feels different lately, less like a cave, more like a place I chose. There's a small shift in how I sit, less guarded. I don't curl up as tightly. Sometimes I even sit near the mirror, the same mirror from before, frosted, tired, like it's been waiting for me to look back. I used to avoid it, afraid it would reflect someone I didn't recognize, afraid I'd see the emptiness I've been pretending not to carry. But yesterday I looked, really looked, not to fix anything, not to judge, just to see if I was still in there. And for the first time, there was a shimmer, not a full reflection, not clarity, but something like breath on the other side of glass, a ripple, a pulse. I didn't smile, didn't cry, I just stayed longer than I ever had. And I remembered something, a sound, me laughing, not the small, polite kind, not the one I do in conversations to keep things moving, a real one, from some summer before all of this. I don't remember what I was laughing at, but I remember how it felt in my body, like the warmth was coming from the inside out, not borrowed, not forced. And maybe that's what I'm starting to feel again, not the laughter itself, but the room it left behind, the echo, the shape of something that mattered. Healing isn't loud, not for people like us. It's not a sunrise, it's the soft glow of a candle that didn't go out, the one you forgot you lit. It's sitting with an unopened letter and not needing to know the ending. It's letting the playlist play without skipping the song that reminds you of someone. It's whispering your own name and not wincing when it sounds unfamiliar. It's taking one step closer to the mirror and realizing you don't hate what you see. Even if it's still blurry, people always talk about healing like it's this powerful transformation. But for me, it's smaller, quieter, more human. It's lighting a candle, opening a window, letting the air touch your skin without flinching. It's presence, not performance. And it's choosing every day to let that presence be enough. So if you're still in the place where everything feels cold, if you're holding your breath without meaning to, if your name still feels heavy in someone else's mouth, I want you to know, you were never cold. They just weren't warm enough to stay. And maybe you don't have to thaw all at once. Maybe just breathing is enough for now. Maybe just staying is the bravest thing you'll do this week, because healing doesn't sound like talking. Sometimes it's just not flinching when someone says your name. I used to think healing would feel loud, like a comeback, like something big enough to prove I'd made it through, but it didn't. It felt like sitting in the same chair I always sat in, but breathing a little deeper. It felt like hearing my name and not immediately shrinking. It felt like lighting the candle again. Same flame, same table. But this time it didn't feel like proof of survival. It just felt warm. The mirror didn't crack, didn't clear in some dramatic fog lifting moment. It melted slowly, softly, like maybe it was never frozen in the first place, just waiting for me to stop rushing it, waiting for me to stop demanding that I reflect before I was ready to be seen. And today, I stood in front of it again. The same mug from the beginning was still there, still cold. But this time, I didn't leave it untouched. I picked it up, took one sip. It wasn't about the coffee. It wasn't even warm, but it tasted like a presence. It tasted like me choosing to stay. That's what no one tells you. Healing doesn't return you to who you were. It just teaches you how to stop running from who you are now and who I am now. She's quiet, not out of fear, not out of loss, but because there's strength in softness. There's dignity in not explaining. There's peace in not performing. I don't owe anyone my volume, not anymore. I used to think my silence made me disappear, that if I didn't keep being on, I'd fade, that if I wasn't laughing, storytelling, emoting, I'd become invisible. But now I know better. My quiet isn't absence. It's survival that made a home in stillness. It's the kind of strength that doesn't brag, that doesn't need validation, that doesn't need to be converted into a lesson or a post or a milestone. I still have days where I fall back into the ache, where I don't want to speak, where the mirror blurs again. But now, I don't fight it, I don't shame it. I let the fog be there. And when it clears, because I've learned to love myself in the waiting, in the blur, in the breath before the words return. There's something beautiful about choosing yourself without announcing it. waking up and deciding to stay, even when no one is clapping, even when no one notices. That's what quiet healing looks like. It's not dramatic, it's not fast, but it's real. It's wiping the mirror, not to see who you were, but to meet who's here now. It's walking through your space and not tiptoeing around the pieces of who you used to be. It's letting the window stay open without fear of what comes in. And when someone asks, "What happened to you?" you just smile, because for the first time, the answer isn't complicated. It's simple. I stayed. Through the silence, through the misunderstanding, through the version of me that didn't speak but never stopped feeling, I stayed. And that was enough, because you don't have to raise your voice to be whole. You just have to stop apologizing for the quiet that kept you alive. So if you're still somewhere between frozen and thawed, if you're still sipping from the same mug, still walking past the mirror, still lighting the candle not for light, but for comfort, know this. You're not behind, you're not broken, you're not unfinished, you're just quiet. And that is not a flaw. It's a language, a rhythm, a kind of grace. The world is loud, but your softness, your stillness, your way of being is not less than. It's another kind of strength, one that doesn't need to shout, one that heals in whispers. So sit with your quiet, let it breathe, let it hold you, because maybe, just maybe, you were never gone. You were just waiting for the moment you no longer needed to be loud to be here. If this story felt like something you've never said out loud, but always carried, you're not alone. Let it sit with you, or share it with someone who's been quiet too long. Sometimes healing begins in the silence we finally recognize as a voice.